Hi guys, Doth Savick here today to talk about the Discraft Force. I'm going to explain why this disc has made it into my driver lineup. It's pushed some destroyers out. In particular, I used to carry one or two destroyers that were just among the most overstable that I could find, and really use those into a strong headwind, a strong left to right wind, or whenever I want to be able to throw hard but have the distance of the shot limited, or maybe even I'm really looking to play a longer shot that skips hard at the end. I used to carry a destroyer or two for that, and I think the Force does it better. So I'm going to show you why. I want to give a shout out to Disc Baron here right before we get started. They helped me quite a bit in getting a bunch of forces to test, so I wanted to show you guys their website really quick. I like that they've got individual pictures of every single disc, and when you go to click on them, it also shows you what weight the disc scaled at. Shows you what it's marked at, 174, but they also then scaled this one at 175, which is pretty nice to get that information up front. It also tells us the dome on them, which is fairly important on the Force. That's really the biggest factor, other than the plastic type, to decide the stability. That one was domey. This next one I'm clicking on here is flat. Of course you can't tell that by pictures, and a lot of websites you're buying discs from don't even show you a picture. But these are even large enough that you can zoom in on them. If you really are looking at a disc for some swirls or want to see the details of the stamp, it's really cool. You can get the giant picture, and they give you the profile of the dome. So go show Disc Baron some love. Even if you're not shopping right now, just go bookmark their page. Try to remember that next time you're searching for a disc. It'll help me out a lot, and it helps Disc Baron. Getting back to the Force, I will show you guys my test group. I got 6 discs in each plastic. The top 2 rows, I guess, are just Z plastic, but I wanted to test them out with the first run Macbeth stamp as well as the original Force stamp on the Z plastic. The next row down is the Big Z, which I'd heard were maybe the most understable, but I didn't find that to be the case. Perhaps they beat in faster, so over a short amount of use, maybe they do become a little bit more understable, but this review is really about how they fly out of the box. And then the last row down here is the ESP Force, which was flying the furthest for us on average. These are lined up based on dome in this picture. Top left is the most dome, and as we move across right, they get flatter. And there really is quite a big difference between the dome on these. So I blacked out the ones that I removed from the test group. I used the extremes, the most dome and the flattest that I could find, to see how far those differentiate from each other. And then I put them into a flight chart that you guys are used to. Now you can see that these fly really pretty similar. I've grouped them. I stuck the 2 first run Macbeth stamp here next to each other. These got 3 throws each. That's a total of 6 throws on those 2 discs, and between the 6 throws they average 340 feet. And that's why they're on the left end of the scale, is because that was the shortest flight. Those were the most overstable. The regular Z was averaging 357, the Big Z was averaging 359, and then the ESP was averaging 360. One of the biggest things that separates the Force from destroyers is that last 1/3 of the flight. When the most overstable destroyers get to that last third of flight, they are already in a hard fade, and they're pushing left really hard for a right-hand backhand player. The Force, even though it has the 0-3, 0 turn, 3 fade, they tend to push forward like impressively well while they're slowing down. They don't dump quite as hard left as those destroyers do. I'll jump right in and show you the footage we took. I'm still avoiding throwing, so again I asked my friend Tyler for some help, and he totally hooked it up. He's out here throwing in front of Art Die again. We're starting first with the most overstable of the Macbeth Big Z. And you're going to notice that the height that Tyler gets these out on changes the flight drawing. You know, this one's a little higher, so I've got finishing a little bit harder left just because it was higher in the air. So I've tried to make him as accurate as possible. On all the tests that Tyler did, I recorded every single one of them, and then whatever his best release angle was and the most consistent from one to the next are the videos that I choose to show the flight to these discs. There's a couple that he just gets a little bit of push on. That was one of them. If you can tell, right about halfway or so, it just slightly started to drift right. But for the most part, they're staying right on the slight hyzer line that Tyler's throwing them on. This doesn't qualify as a max distance disc, the Force. Not unless you're throwing 65 to 70 miles an hour down at sea level, or up at our elevation, you probably need to be throwing closer to 70 miles an hour. That's a very, very small set of people that have that much arm speed. So we don't even need to talk about it, right? I'm trying to review this disc for people like me that have them, you know, 60 to 65 mile per hour. If we drop that down to even 55 mile per hour, then we're talking about like a really large chunk of disc golfers. And for the most part, you know, that's what the flight number should apply to. And it does so accurately. You know, if you're in that 55 to 65 mile per hour arm speed range, you're probably not going to get any turn out of this disc. Not unless you get a lighter weight one, not unless you beat the hell out of it. But you know, when they're new, they're really overstable. That does not make for a max distance disc. It does make for a utility driver, I think is a good way to look at it. So if I push them right up next to the Forces and the Kongs that I reviewed last, this is kind of how it stacks up. On the top row here, I've got that same Force flight chart that we were looking at earlier. And then on the bottom, I've got my old destroyer flight chart split in half. 3 destroyers on the left that are the most overstable, 3 destroyers on the right that are the straightest to understable. And then in the middle, I've got those 6 Kongs. And especially looking at how the Forces fly, it really just kind of pushes the Kongs out of any chance of earning a spot in my bag. These 3 destroyers are the ones that I would carry for a utility disc. And they, well, even how I've got them drawn here, you can see how hard they dump left at the end compared to pretty much any of the drawings I've got for the Forces. That shows that the Force likes to stay straighter a little bit longer, but they are every bit as resistant to high-speed turn as these destroyers here, at least for the speed that I can put on them. You know, if you get 70, 75 miles an hour, maybe you're going to see a greater difference between the different plastics that the Force comes in compared to these most overstable destroyers. You know, you might have a greater use for the Force if you are used to throwing a lot of flex shots. If you're throwing things out on a big anhyzer, then great. You might love the Force. That might be, you know, your go-to distance driver or something like that. But if you're in a normal person arm speed and you're looking for a disc that you can hyzer flip to flat or release flat and flip to anti, you're going to really have a hard time getting a Force to do that unless you really beat one up first. So it's earning a spot in my bag. There's no way a Kong is making it into the bag, and I'm happy to push out these destroyers on the left side and select a Force or 2 that's going to go right along with the understable to straight destroyers. Another interesting thing I'd say about the Force is that throughout the different plastic types, the dome, the flight plate on them, feels quite a bit stiffer than the flight plate on the Star Destroyers. These Star Destroyers tend to have a whole lot more flex on them. This one, being a subtle dome and max weight, is not a one that I can like really push my thumb into a whole lot, but it's still a little bit of a softer top compared with any of these Forces. And that got me thinking that the flight plate might actually be thicker. So I actually cut a couple up. I went and found a used Force because I didn't want to cut any of the ones up that I have and just slice straight into it. And I already had a destroyer that I'd cut up earlier. And I found that there is 0.25 millimeters difference in the thickness of that flight plate. The Force is 1.75 millimeters and the destroyer is 1.5. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I wonder if that has anything to do with how they're setting up when they're come out of the molds, you know, that there's more plastic in the tops of these Forces. And I kind of wonder if that changes with the weight of the disc as well, you know. Unfortunately, that would be a very sad day to cut into that many different discs of different weights and whatnot, but I thought I'd sacrifice a couple at least. So I thought it was interesting to see that the destroyers have a little bit thinner top. If you're really like to push your thumb, you know, deep into a soft dome, you're not going to find that with a Force. But otherwise, I think the plastic that they're coming in is great. Like certainly the swirls that Discraft has got in their ESP plastic is far superior to the swirls that Innova's getting out, at least on the regular. You know, Innova's got some great swirls on occasion, but their average swirl game just isn't there. So I hope this information will help some of you decide what disc to put in your bag, you know, or, you know, as you're trying different things out. The next ones that I want to see is if I can push some of these destroyers out on the understable side, and that's going to be a tough thing to do. I can tell you, I really love those destroyers. I'm looking at testing out the Raider and the D2 Max, and I've started getting some DD3s. They're not going to be on the understable side here, but more like somewhere in the middle. Certainly flying a whole lot further than these Kongs are. What else am I looking at? MVP Octane. You guys get the point. There's a number of discs in here. If you have any suggestions for me, anything that you want to see me test next, feel free to leave a message and let me know. I'm excited to try some more and see what I can find. Thanks for watching.